taking a daily look at the biggest stories in Denver sports and interacting live with you, the Coffee Break fam. So sit back, relax, grab a cup of Joe, and enjoy your coffee break. Here's your host, Rachel V.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome into the first show of 2024. I'm sure you're going to hear that literally all day as everybody obviously returning back to work. I hope you all had a very wonderful holiday. The game on Sunday was a bit of a snoozer. I think we can all agree with that. Obviously, looking at the Broncos taking on the Chargers, the Jarrett Stidham show. And was there a giant spark in the offense like Sean Payton was hoping to see? I think we can all agree, not necessarily. We're going to dive into a lot of the numbers between when Russell Wilson played the Chargers not too long ago versus Jarrett Stidham, and we're going to really dive deep into some of those numbers because some people are saying, Jarrett Stidham played a lot better than Russell Wilson, but I think a lot of people are actually going to be surprised that the numbers were very, very similar. Before we get into that, though, can we really quick talk about the college football playoffs yesterday? Holy smokes, I'm getting ready to go to bed. Here I am, and I'm like, all right, we got this. Washington's going to absolutely roll it. Whatever. We're going to bed. Boom. My fiance is like, Rachel, you need to come downstairs right now because, of course, Texas coming back, almost winning it. Absolutely crazy. And, of course, who doesn't love it when Alabama loses? I'm sorry to anybody with Roll Tide. But, yeah, I was definitely happy. I am rooting for Washington all the way. Take down Michigan. I'm excited for next Monday night. So plenty of good stuff. But, you guys, those games were absolutely insane to watch yesterday. I feel like for quite a long time, we were watching the college football playoffs, and it was like, oh, man, these are like boring games. You know, they're winning by 14, 20 plus points, whatever. But I feel like the past couple of years, it has felt truly like the playoffs. It has been so much fun to watch. And of course, just having another full day of football yesterday on Monday was an absolute dream. So I'm happy you guys are all hanging out. Thanks for chilling with us in the comments. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you subscribe and like too. That way we can get out to more Denver Broncos fans, Colorado Avalanche fans, Denver Nuggets fans, and of course, just football fans in general. So let's get into some of the numbers, everybody, because yes, the numbers were quite similar between Russell Wilson when he played the Chargers not too long ago and Jarrett Stidham. So again, let's take a look. 21 out of 33 for Russell Wilson, 20 versus 31, 224 yards for both quarterbacks. Actually, that's the wrong picture right there too. Obviously, Jarrett Stidham with 1 touchdown. Russell Wilson had 2, 1 interception, and then no interceptions for Jarrett Stidham. QB rating was very, very similar as well. So it was definitely interesting to kind of take a look at those numbers. And the game felt like a snoozer. I know I already said that, but it really did. And it was one of these like, okay, I just want this game to end. But it kind of also felt like there was the tiniest, and I mean the tiniest, you guys, spark because we were seeing more field goals. And it didn't feel like Russell Wilson was running around for his life. It didn't feel like Jarrett Stidham was running around for his life. And I feel like those kind of moments definitely they add to the energy of the game. So when we're watching Russell Wilson come close to a sack and he's running all over the field and you're like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to him? It feels like there can be like that little jolt of excitement compared to with Jarrett Stidham. It felt like he was just throwing it away or whatever it was. Now we also have to realize the fact that they played very, very similar, you guys, tells me one thing. One, again, Russell Wilson played the Chargers literally just a few weeks ago. Like, this isn't a game that happened early on in the season. So Russell Wilson should have already had worked up this connection with a lot of other players, which is where you're like, he should have looked a lot better compared to Jarrett Stidham, who's obviously coming in 1 week of being the starter. They don't have Courtland Sutton out there, which was a huge blow to that offense. Obviously, wide receiver number 1 right there. So the fact that they looked the same, it doesn't help Russell Wilson's case, and I do want to give credit to Russell Wilson because the way he handled being benched was impressive. He was out there high-fiving guys as they were coming off of the sidelines. He was out there signing autographs with the fans, taking selfies with them. He was out there helping Jarrett Stidham as much as he could. Now, I did find it very interesting, and I'm very curious to hear from a lot of other people on this. He was still the captain, which I appreciate. He very much has those leadership qualities. But to have them go out there, everyone was kind of like, what's happening here? And that one kind of caught me just a little bit off guard. I would have thought, Jarrett Stidham would have gone out there being QB number 1. And when you're QB number 1, you're really the leader of the team. So that was a little weird to me, but maybe that was just one of those things where they were like, you know what? We're not going to fight as many battles if we don't need to. He's still a captain. We're going to put him out there. And there was so much respect for him in the locker room too after the win on Sunday. You could just tell everybody that was asked about handling the situation said both like good things about both Jarrett Stidham and the way he's handled everything and the way Russell Wilson has. But I did want to give credit and give roses where roses are due, because Russell Wilson really did. Like every single time I looked down there, he was clapping for the offense and he just looked good. Like he wasn't moping on the sidelines, which he easily could have done. And you kind of have to appreciate that. Now, the fact that he had his helmet on for a majority of the game, definitely interesting, but you know what? We all have our quirks. We all like to do our things. We all do exactly what we do every single game day. So that we can move on from. But it was definitely interesting. And the numbers are just, it's fascinating, you guys. So let's dive into Wilson versus the Chargers. I wanted to list out all of the plays because I feel like that's where a lot of people are kind of diving into a lot of certain things. You know, some people are like, oh, well, Jarrett Stidham had one big pass to little Jordan Humphrey, and that was it. Well, that was the same thing for Russell Wilson. He had a deep pass to Courtland Sutton for 46 yards a couple weeks ago when they played the Chargers. We saw that exact same thing with the deep pass to little Jordan Humphreys for 54 yards. Essentially, as you're going down the list, so many of these things are looking the exact same. But there are certain areas where it was really bad. There's a lot of 3-and-outs, which are bad. You have the interception for Russell Wilson against the Chargers. You're seeing some punts, but you're seeing more field goals. Like, it's fascinating, and I think a lot of people are getting kind of caught up on the fact that Russ was able to put big touchdown numbers up in the fourth quarter, where here's the thing. He was mediocre, average at best from quarters 1 through 3, and then he could come in and save the day. When you don't want a quarterback that has to come in and save the day, you want a quarterback who is able to do a complete game. And I think we can all agree, and you let me know in the comments, Russell Wilson this season was an average quarterback at best. And then you look at the difference between these two guys and how they are getting paid, and they should not even have relatively close numbers at all. And I think that's where a lot of people are definitely kind of chiming in and being like, yeah, if Jarrett Stidham can do it for $5 million a year, then Russell Wilson should be doing much, much better with the crazy amount of money he's getting. Here's my other thing, though. And this is where I'm getting a little bit frustrated, Broncos country, is the Walton Penner ownership group brought in Sean Payton. But very clearly, and the more and more that stuff has come out, it's definitely he had no intentions of playing with Russell Wilson in the long haul. He was going to move on from Russell Wilson, what seemed like from the get-go. That's why you pay the backup QB so much money. Why are you putting yourself in this debacle right now then, knowing that you have to pay this quarterback so much money, you guys, and you brought in a head coach who didn't really want to work with him or who just kind of assumed that they were going to pass over, and now we're in this huge debacle when it comes to the cash and what they're going to do. I find that to be a little bit frustrating as part of a fan base. I don't know how you all feel, so please let me know in the comments. But I'm like, why didn't you bring in a head coach who actually wanted to work with Russell Wilson, who wanted to see the best play out of Russell Wilson, who was going to go to the strengths of the quarterback that you were going to be paying so much money to, instead of bringing in the head coach who was going to get rid of the quarterback and kind of leave you in this dilemma right here? Because there are other missing pieces for this Denver Broncos team that they also are going to have to invest in. So I'm in this frustrated part where I don't know how I'm supposed to feel, because you want to trust the Walton Penner group and say, okay, I want to trust you because I really want to see this team succeed and what they're doing for the fans and how, game days are looking. Everything's looking great. But at the exact same time, the fact that George Paton had to have these phone calls with Russell Wilson's agent and all of this stuff is coming out. And you guys, I don't think it's over. I don't think this is the last of the Russell Wilson versus the Denver Broncos that we're going to see. I think when the season's over, we're going to be seeing a lot more of it. And it makes you a little frustrated. I saw Will Peterson had actually tweeted out after the NFLPA, notion had come out or whatever it was. And he was like, man, it's kind of hard to root for this ownership right now because it's a little frustrating. And it kind of does. You're seeing them try and take advantage of the situation that Russell Wilson was in. And it was a little frustrating. And I'm like, ugh. Did they just think that they could pull a fast one and say, you know what, whatever, Russell Wilson, you're going to want to play so badly that you're going to do whatever we say? And props to Russell Wilson for sticking with what he believes and what he knows he deserves and holding out on that one. But at the exact same time, now we're in this huge situation, and it's just it's kind of frustrating. So I'm very curious how a lot of you are feeling. Jarrett Stidham is not going to be the answer. I'm glad that they were able to get a win. They'll obviously look ahead to try and get a winning season, but I do see that our very own Andrew Mason is behind the scenes. So of course want to bring him in because Mace, tell me how you're feeling about the Jarrett Stidham conversation that's happening right now. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Rachel. And what specifically regarding Jarrett Stidham do you want me to address?
How the fact the numbers are so similar to when Russell Wilson was playing as well. Like, you look at the numbers, Mace, and they are so similar.
Well, it's a different path to the same result is kind of what we're seeing right now. You look at, for example, you look at the passing chart for Jarrett Stidham compared to that of Russell Wilson.
Yeah.
He's throwing the ball in areas of the field where Wilson was struggling to do it. And so that's why you saw the routes that were run on Sunday, more slants, more crossers, more short to intermediate stuff. Even like the touchdown to Lil Jordan Humphrey, where Stidham steps up and finds Humphrey. That's between the numbers right seam, whereas most of Russell Wilson's stuff is outside the numbers and either right behind the line of scrimmage or at the line of scrimmage or going deep. The intermediate game has kind of been absent this year, and the intermediate between the numbers basically non-existent. So it looked more like what Sean Payton generally desires from a quarterback, desires from an offense. The result being the same. I mean, you can kind of dive into a lot of factors.
Okay, Mace.
Didn't have Courtland Sutton for one. That mattered.
That's huge. Your mic sounds to be glitching just a tiny bit, my friend. So I'm gonna have you hop out, and then we will bring you right back in. Hopefully, once you can unplug and replug back in real quick.
Okay. Well.
Sounds good. All right, Andrew Mason, real quick. Hopefully, we'll get him back in just a quick second. But you guys, I 100% agree. This was definitely more of a Sean Payton offense that that he really wanted to see throughout the season. And again, it kind of goes back to this fighting notion of where you want to be. Did you want everybody to buy into Russell Wilson and just play to his strengths? Or did you 100% want to just say, hey, I want the head coach that's going to be able to, turn any quarterback? And they're going to go to the draft. And we probably saw possibly maybe one of the quarterbacks playing this weekend who could be the next quarterback of the Denver Broncos. Let me know in the comments which one you would like to see the most. But it's 100% one of these very interesting conversations that we have to have now about this Broncos offense. And real quick, too, I'm going to pull up some of these numbers. And it's also fascinating because you look at the first downs and the pass versus rush and how they did on third downs and the total amount of plays, total amount of yards, the 2 sacks for 12 yards for Stidham versus the Chargers versus 2 sacks for 8 yards with Russell Wilson and the Chargers and 0 turnovers, but 1 interception. Like, the numbers are so similar that it does almost feel like they had the same game plan, but kind of pointing back to what Mace was saying, it is very much like those slant routes. And we're seeing a little bit more of that. And it's different, but at the exact same time, the same. And I think it's so fascinating as we kind of just take a deeper look at all of this. So Andrew Mason, I believe, is back, so we can see if we can bring him in. Mace, can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear. I mean, I had the same
Much
setup.
Much better, my friend.
I don't get it. I did nothing. I did nothing, and I had the exact same setup yesterday. I did 2 shows. This is maddening at times.
Technology, my friend. We just learned to roll with it. All right, Mace, but give me your feedback too on Jarrett Stidham. Most likely not the future for this Denver Broncos team, but he may be the backup next year, which wouldn't surprise me at all. When you're looking ahead to even just this Raiders game, there's kind of this thought of they want the winning record, but does it matter in the long run, Mace? Because you almost want them to lose a bit because maybe you move up 1 or 2 spots in the draft, but at the exact same time, it's like, if you're moving up 1 or 2 spots in the draft, does that even matter? I feel like there's so many of these, like, they could matter the teensiest tiny bit, but at the exact same time, it doesn't matter at all.
It doesn't matter unless you're sitting there and you have pick 18 because you went 9-8 and you won those last 2 games, and somebody jumps you at 17 and picks Michael Penix Jr. when you wanted him.
Fair.
You don't know. So in other words, you don't know whether it's going to matter or not. You really don't. And so basically it's the whole thing of bird in the hand, 2 in the bush. What you get today, if you finish off 9-8, is the first winning season in 7 years, is being able to say, hey, we were 8-3 down the stretch after starting 1-5. Legitimately, if the Broncos win this game, they can say, hey, the last 2.5 months of the season, we were one of the best teams in football.
Yeah.
And the results are going to back it up. I mean, yeah, that Patriots loss is frustrating, no doubt, but you would have beaten the Browns, albeit with P.J. Walker and Dorian Thompson-Robinson. You would have beaten the Chiefs. You would have beaten the Bills in Buffalo. So you've answered a question as to whether you can hang with teams. Now, that being said, the method of beating those teams, as we learned in December, wasn't sustainable. Because once the takeaways dried up and the giveaways increased, it was curtains for the Broncos beating those types of teams. So you can feel good that you can hang with teams, but you've still got a ways to go. But the whole thing of, okay, can this team be resourceful? Is their belief in what Sean Payton and his staff are doing? That gets underscored if you finish this off at 9-8.
What was your takeaway? And I want to know what your biggest takeaway from Sean Payton meeting with the media yesterday was. But for me, just after the game in the press conference, how Sean Payton praised Jarrett Stidham more than we had seen him praise Russell Wilson all season long, I thought was very telling, Mace.
It was his, by the way, it's Teddy's birthday today, so wish him a happy birthday. Oh, it's Drew's birthday too. It is. Remember that from Vic Fangio a couple of years ago?
How could we forget?
A little bit of that. Now, that being said, you go back to the start of training camp, and when Sean Payton was ripping Nathaniel Hackett, part of it was, basically trying to say, okay, the failures last year were on coaching, not on the quarterback, and we can get some things right. And the funny thing is, if you go by a base level numbers argument,
Yeah,
they actually did get something out of Russell Wilson, right? I mean, it was a season that, in terms of some base level metrics, approximated what he did for some chunks of his time in Seattle. But you dig deeper, and beneath the surface, it was pretty mid in the end. And this is the other thing. Like, it's all about proving it's all about the contract. The contract was the big discussion point last week, obviously. If Russell Wilson has a contract paying $20 million a year and that's it, are we having this discussion right now? Are we talking about, we're certainly not talking about $85 million dead money, right? If he doesn't have and again, the whole thing with the injury guarantee, the fifth year, the 2025 salary being guaranteed on the fifth day of the league year. If that clause wasn't in the contract, I think you'd probably see the Broncos roll with Russell Wilson for one more year while drafting somebody and having Russell Wilson be the bridge to that quarterback. It's just when you have the finances involved with it and the cap economics involved with it, that's changed the dynamic of the discussion.
Mace, there is, and I know I could say this with the possibility that there's always a chance, but there is no way Russell Wilson is back next year with the Broncos, right? Like, too much has happened now at this point that there's just a 0% chance, or we'll say less than 5% chance.
I'd say less than 5%. I mean, put it this way. I mean, him coming back would be as surprising as a frog flying out of my mouth right now.
Okay. I'm just making sure, because you never can say never, but it also feels like this divorce has kind of ended ugly, and I have a feeling it's just going to continue to get uglier and uglier.
Listening to Russell Wilson last Friday, he said he hoped to come back, but when his side is portraying it as a threat to be benched, it's like the meme of Homer Simpson going across the bridge and tossing a lit match behind him and it lights on fire.
Yeah.
That's basically it. Of course, at the end of the episode, he did go back to the Springfield nuclear power plant on the show, but I don't think that's going to work out like that here.
I'm very curious your thoughts on, obviously, all the stuff that came out over the weekend before the game. What was your biggest takeaway from that?
I mean, you've definitely got a little bit of, there's obviously kind of the he said, she said thing here. Reality is somewhere in between, I would say. Um, and there's, when you see the report from Ian Rappaport, there were players that were talking about open receivers on film, not finding him. I mean, there's some elements of truth to both sides of this. I mean,
Yep.
shoot, all you have to do is look at the film, the all 22, and you can see open receivers that are in the field of vision that Russell Wilson wasn't finding, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so like that part of it, yeah, that's perfectly valid. I mean, that's right there.
Yeah. Which it's funny
Yeah,
too, Mace, because we saw the height play a little bit into the game on Sunday.
yeah,
Like we saw where Jarrett Stidham's height definitely allowed him to advance a couple plays where with Russell Wilson, we probably would have saw him moving around more, which
hmm
ultimately can end in sacks. And I think that we did see that improvement right there just based on height alone.
right. And you saw that the sack rate went down. I mean, look,
Yeah.
it wasn't perfect. I mean, you had the butt sack where Khalil Mack pushed Ben Powers back into Jarrett Stidham and didn't escape, and he went down. But you
Which in a
also,
moment too, Mace, I was
yeah.
like, oh no, is he hurt? I was like, is Russell Wilson going to have to come back in and be
Oh,
the backup quarterback? I was like,
yeah.
here we go, everybody.
When he took off and scrambled early in the game, and it was almost a late hit there coming
Yep.
in as he slid, but no call was made. Uh, like, okay, all right, is he gonna get up? Hope he gets up. I mean, the plot twist on this that would be the ultimate kick in the tail is if Stidham got injured, Russell Wilson went back in, and then he got injured, and all of a sudden you were on the hook for $37 million. Oh my! I mean,
I know.
that would be, and then your commitment to Russell Wilson goes from $85 million to $112 million over time. I mean, that's, hey, 112 extra $37 million. That can buy you a couple of really good defensive linemen if you use it right. So I mean,
For sure.
even though it's down the line in terms of how the accounting would come in, it does actually matter in terms of your long term planning because Greg Penner and the Walton Penner Group, they have cash galore, but they can't. But they can only manipulate the cap, but so much. That's the challenge of operating in the National Football League. This isn't Major League Baseball where it's just, oh, you go to the luxury tax. That's fine. Like if this were baseball, it'd be so easy. You just let him go. You'd accept a year in the luxury tax, and you just move on. You might be in the conversation for Kirk Cousins in 2 months. It's probably not happening here.
I don't think that one's happening either. What did you hear that sparked your attention the most from Sean Payton yesterday when he met with the media?
Well, I wasn't really surprised to hear what he said about Jarrett Stidham and kind of the tone of what he said. Um, I thought I asked him a different question. I asked him about Jaleel McLaughlin, and I thought it was really interesting to hear him talk about McLaughlin kind of asking for more work, particularly in the passing game,
Mhm.
getting it. I mean, it's interesting to look at the running back position right now because Javonte Williams, he did have an explosive run on Sunday, but still that per carry average isn't where you want to be. You hope he's back next year to where he was before, but you're gonna have to wait and see on that. Um, right now, I look at the most secure part of that running back room, barring injury,
Mhm.
as Jaleel McLaughlin coming back in that hybrid role. Sean Payton went back to a term that he's used in previous offenses that he was using to talk about Greg Dulcich back in June. The Joker is what he calls it. The player that you can kind of use as a chess piece, move around, create some mismatches with that player. Originally the thought was it's going to come from the tight end position perhaps.
Uh-huh.
Now, when he's talking about McLaughlin evolving into that role, that's really interesting because that creates a specific and pretty robust role for Jaleel McLaughlin, who has, by the way, officially started 2 of the last 3 games. It's just the formations they were in. He's had double-digit touches the last couple of games. You can see based on what they say, and Peyton underscoring that, or what they did, and Peyton underscoring that with what he said yesterday, McLaughlin is becoming a real significant part of their planning going forward.
You may know this. I otherwise would have to look it up. When does Javante's contract end?
He's got one more year on his rookie deal.
Okay. And P. Ryan's one more year, or is this?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
So
Sean Payton's really looking to the future then, seeing what they got.
Yeah. Now the question is, with Javonte being the number one back, I don't think they see Jaleel McLaughlin as the number one back. If they see him as a joker, they see him as somebody who's going to come in, work in some packages. I think basically about 10 to 12 touches a game is going to end up being typical for him. So do you, as you go into the draft process, do you take a look at the running backs? Do you see if any fall, and do you look at that position? Because Javonte would be in the last year of his rookie deal. You don't know if he's going to get all the way back. I mean, I'll toss a name of a big back out there who might complement really well with McLaughlin as the joker. A guy like Braylon Allen out of Wisconsin, if he's in the draft process, huge and incredibly young. I mean, he was in college at the age of 17, so. This is a guy who's, even though he got plenty of use and there's a little bit of an injury concern, which is why he will drop in the draft, I think. He's got plenty of tread left on the tire, no doubt. And, I mean, he's a guy, like, he's, 240, 245 pounds, and he's got burst. He'll run over you. He's someone like that, if you're making a kind of long-term plan, could kind of, it could kind of be worth considering there. So middle rounds, I wouldn't be surprised to see the Broncos take a look at running back, even though they've got a lot of needs, and they're going to have to look to the draft to address a bunch of them, starting with quarterback. I mean, this is the other thing. Last night, the chatter in Broncos country, Michael Penix Jr. might look pretty good in orange and blue.
Yes, indeed.
I have a little piece up on that at denversports.com. Chris Harris Jr. going on social media saying if they drafted Penix, he'd buy his jersey.
Yep, I saw that too. I was like, all right.
Yeah, so it's going to be a fun few months here.
For sure. Mace, real quick, have you ever seen this fan base so divided? Because it really feels like it's either Team Sean Payton or Team Russell Wilson, and there's very few in between. That's just one of the things that I've noticed this weekend.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Drew Lock, Teddy Bridgewater.
Okay.
Tim Tebow, not Tim Tebow.
Okay, that makes me feel a little bit better. I wasn't around for all of those years in the media. I was a fan, but when you're in the media, I feel like there's a bit of a different outlook because you hear all the sides, right, compared to just some of it.
Yep, and just wait, because if they are in the draft quarterback conversation and they don't move up to the top 2-3 picks, if the conversation is, in the maybe moving up for Jaden Daniels, but perhaps the Bo Nix, Michael Penix Jr., J.J. McCarthy conversation. Just based on what I saw last night, Rachel, this is going to divide Broncos country into camps over which quarterback they like. I mean, because, it's sometimes, Penix, Bo Nix. It's the next few months could be really interesting, because that's another thing about these if they are picking from the Nix, Penix, McCarthy pool, they're different types of quarterbacks.
Yeah,
these three. I mean, McCarthy especially is very different from Nix and Penix. I mean, McCarthy is more of kind of the classic, rhythm kind of quarterback. But I'll say this: when you watch Penix last night, and watching him over the course of the year, he has improved this year and improved from his Indiana time in terms of operating from the pocket. You look at him and you see somebody who, he could do the Sean Payton things. Bo Nix can do the Sean Payton things. Now, Bo Nix probably has a little bit more capacity to take off and get yardage on the ground. Penix has some mobility, but the injuries have kind of forced him to become a little bit more of a pocket operator, which is fine. Probably ends up suiting him really well. The other thing on Penix, we wouldn't be talking about him in the middle of the first round potentially if he didn't have the injury history. If he didn't have two ACL tears if he didn't have injuries to both shoulders over the last few years. There are some teams that will probably fail him on the medicals. And so I would expect there'll be some teams in the NFL for whom Penix is a medical red flag and he's off their boards entirely.
Fascinating. Which one do you believe fits Sean Payton's offense the best?
In order of those three, I think it's Penix, Nix, McCarthy in that order. And it's not, I mean, they all have the ability to be on rhythm, but you do want a little bit of a dynamic capability to that quarterback. And I think that's where Penix and Nix separate themselves from JJ McCarthy. I mean, McCarthy, did come through in the clutch last night.
Yeah.
Don't forget, he went several games between touchdown passes, right? Yep. It felt at times watching Michigan that McCarthy was a little bit more of a passenger on the plane, whereas with Washington and Oregon, that those Nix and Penix were, if not flying the plane, they actually, they are it. I mean, they are, they are everything to those teams. I wouldn't take too much from Bo Nix's game yesterday against Liberty because Liberty was terrible. I mean, the game was not as close as the score would indicate, and the score is 45-6. But
which is funny because they started out hot and then it just went downhill very quick.
But I would take plenty from what Nix did in other games, and I think the Pac-12 championship game in particular, both Nix and Penix were making high-level plays out there.
Here we go, Mace.
It's going to be a heck of a debate over the next few months, Rachel. Yeah. What I hope is if the Broncos draft one of these quarterbacks, that everyone gets behind him and doesn't start saying, "Oh, well, if they only drafted the other." No, and be patient because to go back to something earlier in the show, Jarrett Stidham could very well be your Week 1 starter in 2024. Ooh. If you've got a young quarterback waiting in the wings, that's fine. If you don't have a young quarterback that is studying and learning things, I think Broncos country would have a lot of trouble with Jarrett Stidham as the QB1 for Week 1.
We will see. Real quick, who are you taking to win the national championship next Monday?
Washington.
All right, me too. Let's roll with them. All right, Andrew Mason, always a pleasure. Thank you, my friend.
My pleasure, Rachel.
Everybody else, we will see you tomorrow, 10:30 a.m. for another episode of Coffee Break. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you subscribe and like this video and comment down below who you are going to be taking next Monday as well. And we will see you guys all tomorrow morning, 10:30 a.m. Bye, everybody.